CUCKOO from Tillman Singer. It's a horror film about a teenage girl stuck at a resort with some frightening individuals. In this movie, we follow Gretchen, played by Hunter Schafer. She's a teenage girl who is forced to move with her dad and stepfamily to a resort town in the German Alps. Her family is building a hotel there that is being managed by a very strange guy named Mr. Koenig, played by Dan Stevens, who gives Gretchen a job at the resort. Things start to turn south when she finds that eerie things are happening around her, including a strange woman chasing her and Koenig seeming to have some sort of ulterior motives. So family is a big subject in this movie. Gretchen has to live with a family that she doesn't really consider her own. Being a generally impartial teenager, she doesn't seem to care much about anything, but she definitely does show resentment toward her stepfamily. The friction between her and her dad is the central conflict, besides of course the fact that there is a strange woman running around this resort causing trouble. This movie was pretty exciting for the most part. It's a little bit slow to jump into its strongest horror elements, but in the meantime it does build lots of intrigue through raising questions. Like, who's that woman chasing Gretchen? And what's causing the crazy hypnosis on Gretchen? And why are people randomly puking? This movie has some pretty weird subject matter, some of which I do feel inclined to keep disclosed just to avoid spoilers. But this movie hits peak weirdness in a third act that really ties everything together. The last half hour or so was really exciting. Is the movie scary? I wouldn't call it terrifying, but it has its moments. It has a handful of jump scares, but not an obnoxious amount by any means. Some of the visual effects are really cool, though there were a couple of times where it looked a little bit cheesy. I think it was whenever a shot ran too long with this sort of stylish, woozy editing, that's when it started to look bad. It otherwise has good visuals. It's shot on 35mm film. That paired with its hazy vintage color grade gives it a really wonderful classic film look. So this movie unfortunately has some horror film cliches, and these are the ones that are actually what really deterred me from the genre for such a long time. Things like isolated small towns with the world's most understaffed police departments and hospitals, and blatantly villainous demeanors that escape everyone but our protagonist. And nobody listening to our protagonist's claims of being pursued, as if that's not something that people generally take seriously. That last one is the hardest one to stomach. Gretchen's dad is super dismissive toward her and shows her absolutely no sympathy despite the total beating she takes in this movie. It does acknowledge that Koenig's behavior is pretty uncanny through this one line.
That's a fucking weird way to put it.
But of course her pleas are completely futile. You don't get bonus points for being self-aware. The biggest thing that shines throughout the movie is Hunter Schafer. She shows a really broad acting range in this movie. There's a few scenes here where she really kills it with the heavy emotions, but she's also really good at leaning into the demeanor of a teenager who is just clearly somewhere else. This is a really great horror film debut for her. She really proves that she has business doing more work in this genre in the future. The rest of the cast was okay. I will say that Jessica Henwick might have been a little bit too young to play Gretchen's stepmom. I'm not saying that there can't be an age gap between her and her husband, but it does make you scratch your chin a little bit. She just doesn't really look all that much older than Gretchen. There's a cop in this movie named Henry, played by Jan Bluthard. I don't know if it was a performance thing or a Tillman Singer thing, but he was more extra than I would have liked at times. He almost brings the film into borderline campy territory. He gets pretty unhinged in a way that was actually kind of jarring. While the movie does get to be pretty exciting, I was left with questions at the end, like what happened to a couple of characters, and how exactly this supernatural hypnotic effect that the evil person has sometimes only affects a single person nearby and sometimes affects multiple people. I'd also like to question Koenig's intentions because they seem to shift around throughout the movie. I think I can make sense of them, but the evolution of his intentions feels a little bit loose. There are other little holes that you can poke here and there, but none of them were big enough to completely undress the film. The title of the movie was clever, but honestly a little bit misleading. If you are expecting this movie to make you lose your mind because of how wild it is, you should curb your expectations. It has outlandish aspects, but it's not gonna snap your brain in half or anything. So again, this movie has some tired tropes and aspects that weren't amazing, but it does have redeeming qualities and builds up plenty of intrigue, leading to a conclusion that is mostly satisfying. All things considered, I'd say that this movie is fine. It's probably for the most loyal horror film fans who won't shrug at some of the more familiar aspects. If you're not really a self-proclaimed horror film fan, I don't think this film will have enough to keep you interested. It might just feel a little bit dumb. Thank you for watching this review. If it brought you any value at all, please give it a like. It really does help the channel grow. I'm going on vacation next week, but hopefully before then, I'll be able to bring you a review for It Ends With Us, or Alien Romulus, or perhaps both.